You're listening to Secure Ventures, a show that follows cutting-edge founders in the cybersecurity space to understand their plights, glories, and revolutionary products. I'm your host, Kyle McNulty. I'm also a full-time investor at InQtel, a strategic investor for the U.S. intelligence and defense communities. This show is a personal outside activity separate from and not affiliated with InQtel in any manner. All comments, opinions, and sponsorships are wholly independent. With me this episode is Rehan Jalil. Rehan is CEO and founder of Securiti AI, which is providing a data command center to help organizations secure and enable their data for AI use cases. Rehan has an incredible track record, which we discuss in more detail on the episode. He sold his first company for $180 million, his second company for $280 million. Securiti AI is his third company and has already raised $180 million to date from top-tier investors, and they're geared up for an even bigger exit. I was incredibly impressed with his track record identifying landmark technology trends and then building differentiated businesses with tailwinds from those trends. In the episode, we walk through how each of these experiences built on one another, the rationale for each business and the origin, and how Securiti AI is positioned at the intersection of three of the most pivotal technology growth areas today: data, AI, and cybersecurity. Rehan, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Kyle, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for hosting it.
Yeah, we're going to go back to your very early career, hopefully something you don't find yourself talking about too much these days, but your role at Sun Microsystems, where you were working on GPUs. I think this was about 25 years ago. And you've done quite a lot in that 25 years. We'll get to it. But I think this is a really interesting place to start, just because GPUs have gained so much more attention these days, and it's not that often that a cybersecurity founder actually has worked on GPUs firsthand. So I'd love to hear your perspective of just kind of the now versus then, and how you've kind of followed this evolution over the last few decades.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite some time back. In fact, the way the story goes is right out of school, I went to school at Purdue, and in the labs, there used to be amazing machines from this company called Sun Microsystems. And they have amazing architecture, high performant, machines where you can do all kinds of MATLAB simulations and all, right? So when you graduate, that was good times, just before, dot-com thing was going on. And Sun was at the center of it. So you get a bunch of offers, but this one company, they were trying to do something beyond just you building an amazing processor and a system. And I wanted to be actually part of a processor design team. I loved computer architecture and all that. So got the opportunity to work within Sun Microsystems with a smaller team, kind of startup within Sun Microsystems, because they had the Spark engines, which is the processor for them. And this team was like trying to say, look, there should be a coprocessor, which all the high performance needs of real-time graphics should be offloaded, and it should be multi-core, and it should be based on new language and all that was being put in place, like OpenGL. So I really got fascinated by that whole thing. That first of all it was very innovative, a thought process. It was kind of a little bit of a startup within Sun Microsystems, and risky project in that sense. They called it Magic, MAGC. And that was the basically the GPU, the first multi-core GPU they're trying to actually build. It was an amazing experience because many things need to be solved at that time, because now you have to have a different compiler. How do you actually parallelize the things on multiple cores, and work with some of the smartest people actually right out of school, literally some of the smartest people who were doing silicon, process architecture, compilers, and of course, creating a framework where people can write applications and work side by side with Spark. I couldn't have asked for anything better. And a bit of a startup experience within Sun Microsystems, right? Learned a lot along the way, and super happy that there's a bunch of learnings that came from it. And my itch to actually do the processor part of it also got kind of fulfilled.
And so you end up leaving Sun and going and doing networking work for a handful of years. I mean, looking back on this now, I'm sure there were reasons for this pivot, but how do you think about like moving away from GPUs, kind of before GPUs really had their like enterprise boom and the realization of all the potential that existed there? Is that like something you're kicking yourself about at all, looking back?
Yeah, no, look, I'm definitely not kicking because did a
Okay.
lot of opportunity to learn a lot of things in between. And part of the reason I kind of went and joined another startup at that point in time, and it was very good that I joined a start actually a startup to learn how you build the entire system versus a silicon. And there is always basically a bridging path. I was doing, of course, silicon part of it and the processor design, and this company needed basically somebody who had that background. They were trying to build their own chips, but for a different application. This was back in the day when internet was just coming through. Internet really meant DSL, right? And especially if you want to go to remote geographies, there was just no high quality phone lines or nor high quality DSL lines. And this was all about taking internet over the wireless at high performance, even in a fixed fashion, and lighting up the whole world with high performance internet. And that again was very inspiring because it was very clear at that point in time that internet will change the world. And if you could be a part of that puzzle somehow to solve the connectivity issue and bring your expertise into the mix, the expertise at that time was simply, frankly, helping to build silicon that they actually had. So within that company, that's how it started. But then uh, I basically love to actually build the systems. And that company was building systems, which means their own hardware, their own radios, their antennas, their own software layer, the management system. So the learning kind of grew from focused on GPUs and processor to actually go up the stack, all of the system. And this was a time when things needs to be built and shipped, and FPGAs have to be, crafted side by side to custom silicon. A lot of learning actually came out of it. In fact, that served well over time. That's how, although it may felt, no question was it was a bit of a different area for me, but the bridge was the expertise in building chips along the way. Did also work with some really smart people and learn a lot. Before I realized that you actually there's another wave coming of super high speed on mobile, right? Which 4G was didn't exist, and that's how the journey kind of went along to go to enable high speed mobile networks.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly going to be a theme over the course of this episode of the transitions between some of these roles that seem a bit disparate at first glance, but then it actually makes more sense when you look back in hindsight. I think that's actually true of most people's careers. When you look at it on paper, it doesn't fully add up. But then once you hear the stories of how it all comes together, it feels much more natural. I mean, an interesting piece here of what you're describing is I just framed it as, hey, you went from GPUs to networking, and like GPUs are super sexy now. Networking is not particularly sexy. But what you just did was said, well, look, at the time, this is when internet was kind of like the future, the hot thing, right? And there was all this potential that existed in the expansion of the internet. And so that was what you jumped to. And again, this kind of ties together the relevance of that point in time and the overall technology ecosystem. So you have this experience, and then you go and start Y Course, right? This is your first company that you're actually going and building from scratch. So you've worked at a big company, you've worked at a startup, getting a chance to kind of play in the networking space and continue building these different systems. And now you decide it's time to go out and do your own thing. What was that decision like for you?
Yeah, I think it was a bit very again once you're in a particular area, you get to see a bit of what is the tip of the spear, like where the world is going. If it's not there, you can get a feel of where is it potentially ending. Aborto was all about fixed wireless and not as high speed. And OFDM was coming through. This was basically the base layer of communication. New techniques like OFDM, OFDMA was coming through, and it was clear that um, the world would be in which internet would be in your pocket, which is your phone. Phones. This is pre-iPhone era, right? But that was becoming a bit more clear, although iPhone wasn't there, that people would want to consume the entire rich, multimedia and the richness of the internet in a way that it should be mobile, and it should be as good as a landline. And but for that, you needed not only the innovations on the wireless technology, but also in the back end. It's something called packet core, because when you deploy, a cellular network, you have to make sure the mobility is working, make sure the billing is working, make sure traffic management is going on. It all comes back to something called a packet core, and that's where it felt like we could actually innovate in that area, because the capacity needs on there is going to go up, and you need a new kinds of system. That was the thesis, and it won't not be anymore just phone calls for the phones. It will be actually the internet for the phones, right? And you needed this backend system for it, and that's what Vicorus did. It was a 4G gateway. Different kinds of 4Gs were there at that point in time. You would have traditional 4G, which become very, very obvious that's going to be the winner, but you had contenders like WiMAX. But this gateway would actually entertain all kinds of competing technologies for 4G. And that's what we ended up building. Amazing team that we had. There also, all the learnings that were there got applied, because Vicorus was actually about building, frankly, very advanced systems, which required your own hardware, it required your own chassis, required your own management software, required all the integrations that you actually had to do with all the wireless providers. So it was an interesting expertise from networking side. Many of our team members actually were deep into the networking side of things from the wireless side. And then, of course, the layer above it, the mobility and anything there on the back end needed for management of and something that we ended up doing, which is going to be in the kind of a next journey that got utilized, was deep back end inspection. Because if you at that point in time, the capacity on the wireless networks was very narrow. So running old applications like Skype and all, we used to consume the bandwidth in a way that they could not bill for it, or they want to bill for it. So they want to understand, the carriers wanted to understand, and the mobile network operators want to understand what kind of traffic is going through it. Can they bill for it, or they shut down some traffic because they can't charge for that kind of traffic, right? So you needed the ability to inspect on wire at high speed what traffic is going through, and that's what was part of this whole system that we built. And frankly, the team did an amazing job, creating this one of literally the most advanced platform that got built. And that's the story of Vicorus. There was a bridge between previous company and this company. Was doing quite different technology, more advanced networking systems. But frankly, that company got successful. We were one of the first ones to deploy the 4G in US, in southern in LA and California, and Southern California. And then, of course, the company got merged with Tel Labs, and that's how the story goes.
This story has given me a flashback to the early days of internet availability on phones pre-iPhone. And I think I was an early teenager at the point, maybe like my second phone. And I noticed that it had a little like mobile TV option on it. And so I was like, oh, this is sweet. I can like watch some TV on my phone. That's awesome. And I gave it a shot. Didn't think anything more of it. It was purely for the novelty. It wasn't like a better experience than watching on an actual TV, right? And then the bill comes back that month, and there's $400 in charges for like the 2 hours that I'd watched on my phone. And I remember my dad had to go to the carrier and say, hey, like, sorry about this. My son had just no idea that this would even cost money. Like, is there a way to disable this and get it back? And they were super nice about it. It was AT&T, and they got it resolved for us. But I was pretty scarred. Like, wow, who knew I could rack up such charges in like 2 hours? But okay, that I digress. You had this interesting journey. You built a successful company here, and you end up selling it after about 4 years for, I think it was like a little bit less than $200 million, right? An awesome
That's
exit
right.
in its own right. But we're going to talk about this a little bit more when we go to Elastica as well and the journey there. I mean, how are you thinking about the decision at this point of whether or not you keep building Y Chorus, or it's kind of the right time to sell and move on to the next thing?
Yeah, I think it was very clear at that point, at least to me, the things that we built, it had to be taken to the market, global markets. We had global customers, but in telcos, you would need an entrenched player. Tel Labs was one of the entrenched players. There were others, and we had partnerships with some of them. Like Alcatel-Lucent used to be a company at that point. They were reselling a product, and to take it to the market when some of the most global customers in telcos out there, which have deep relationships, there was a good path to take the technology to those markets, and that was kind of the decision path for that company, and it worked out for the team.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, I alluded to earlier that there's going to be some seemingly strange transitions. So after Y Chorus, after this awesome exit, you go and start Elastica, which is essentially CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker, helping manage just how users are accessing all the different cloud resources within an organization, right? Again, like first glance, I don't see the specific tie-in between building like network infrastructure and actually like provisioning access to cloud assets. So how did this come about? Like what made you decide to tackle this problem in particular?
Yeah, I think what happened is after Y Chorus, I took a couple of months off, and uh, what I realized in that time, I was looking at some of the MBA students who were doing their MBA projects, and this whole new wave was becoming obvious. The Google Drive was new, and this students who sent me this thing, it was on a Google Drive, and it was quite fascinating that the whole wave of SaaS applications potentially would be coming. Google Drive was there, Dropbox, and these are very early applications. Of course, Salesforce was there, but not much many. If this is the time when Microsoft was like, you had to have tooling on your desktop and only use basically on the desktop tools. I think the thesis there was that no question, there's a SaaS applications are going to be the norm. That's the world is going to be. On-premise applications are not going to be the way the world would be. And if that happens, if you project that forward, which means the traditional security, which was pretty much draw a perimeter around my data center or my enterprise, and that's my security or my endpoint, that's going to completely be shattered. Because if you back in the day, you could not access your applications till you're in the office or till you VPN into the office. But if you go to SaaS, then any person can work from home and go straight to the SaaS applications, which means it completely shatters your architecture on the security side of things. Now, why we kind of thought through this thing is reason was at Y Chorus, we were doing deep packet inspection, which means the team and myself had the understanding of how to inspect actual traffic and infer from it what's going on. Just the example you gave, you got a TV bill, right? Because somebody had the understanding you're watching TV and how much you've consumed, right? Or you're going to a site which is actually a video and you how much you're consuming, and they were differential pricing at that point, at that point in time. So taking that expertise and thinking through if the world would be SaaS and accessing it from anywhere, where would the security sit? It was very obvious the security will also be in the cloud for it, right? It cannot be in your own perimeter because you would want straight to go from here, get inspected somewhere in the cloud, and then go to your SaaS application. So that thesis that started that Elastica, but wasn't a clean feedback. Early days, when you go with this concept and slide, and you go talk to a CISO, often you'll just get um, uh, cynical smiles because first of all, CISO will say, "Oh, I am not going to allow a SaaS application in my environment, and if I don't have a SaaS application, I don't even need you." So first 1 or 2 years was the feedback was sometimes harshly negative on it, that the SaaS is not going to be real. We don't allow SaaS. And if there's no SaaS, forget about your company, right? Um, so with a lot of doubt, but you still had the conviction, we kept going forward. And frankly, by 2014, mid of 2014 or something, became very clear SaaS is the one of the way. And this CASB thing became a term, right? And we, along with a couple of some of our own competitors, you know, participated in creating this whole category of CASB. That became one of the hottest technologies that enterprise should have, right? For 3 years in a row, Gartner had this is the hottest things you should have actually in the cybersecurity side. And it was great journey there to actually from zero market, almost no market, to actually seeing that becoming the hot area, and then transforming that to other things because it became kind of sassy and all other things, other things that we ended up doing later on. But there was definitely a relationship in here. The deep packet inspection was a relationship, even if that was not the only thing that CASB does, but that's how we got started.
I mean, something that just absolutely jumped out at me is the remarkable parallel between what you just described with SaaS applications in the early 2010s and the AI ecosystem in the last couple of years, right? Like you're nodding your
Absolutely.
head. You obviously see it as well, but
Yeah.
the whole transition of, hey, CISOs are just going to block these AI tools from being used internally. Like we're not going to let our users go to ChatGPT because there's too much risk. And so we don't actually need like an AI security tool because we're not letting anyone use that to begin with. But again, to your point, like a year or two go by and all of a sudden everyone realizes like, hey, this provides such a level of improvement to the organization that we can't just restrict and prevent this. Again, same as SaaS applications. And so all of a sudden you need those security controls after all. So, I mean, this ties into something broader, which I think has really jumped out at me from this conversation so far. I think you're very thoughtful in terms of technology trends in the broader market and ecosystem that have been like important factors in the businesses that you've started. And that sounds like fairly straightforward to say out loud, but I actually don't think that's true for a large majority of founders who focus more on like what is a problem that a group has, like a certain customer profile has, and then let me go ahead and try to solve that. Where again, I think yours is a little bit more around not just like what is a problem that someone has, but how is that related to like larger technological like landmark shifts, whether it's again like the internet, whether it's the rise of mobile, the rise of SaaS apps, and then we'll talk about now security AI and how that's related to the whole rise of data and now AI as well. So why don't we do that? We'll jump ahead a little bit. You started security in 2018. I imagine at the time this is related a little bit to like the thesis of the growing value of data. But let me give you the chance to put it in your own words.
You're absolutely right. The thesis for Securiti AI was that, but I'll tell you a little bit connecting the dots there.
Yeah.
After Elastica, we ended up in, through Blue Code, ended up in security, ended up in actually Symantec. And there you actually have the opportunity to see thousands of customers and talk to thousands of customers to understand what do they really care about. They care about many things. But where we saw was very fragmented was controls on data. And there was no one control needed. You need, privacy controls, you need security controls, you need access controls, you need security posture controls, you need, compliance controls. And there would be like dozens of different tools getting utilized inside a company. And also for on-premise. And the world is going cloud, which is, whole, multi-cloud and hyperscalers. That's where the most data is going. So the thesis really was that if we created a platform which truly was not just a marketing platform, but actually as a proof fabric around visibility on data and all context around data in terms of understanding, what's inside it, who has access to it, what activity may be going on it, where is it sitting, what laws apply on it, what compliance we should be getting. If you created that fabric of information. We called actually data command graph to that now. Then you can actually have blades on it, blades for security, blades for privacy, blades for access, blades for other things. And you would not need basically this disparate tools which create silos and actually creates big holes in the security understanding and controls understanding. That was the thesis, really. But for us, the few things uh, uh, had to happen. It was that cloud adoption had to happen, so new architectures would be needed. Traditional controls would not be sufficient, so we bet a little bit on that. More and more companies going to the cloud. AI was definitely part of it. That's the company's name is Securiti AI. But many things happened subsequently, which was beyond imagination, right? Which happened in the last couple of years. And there is a trend to it. If you look at Vorus, we didn't know iPhone is going to come, right? Well, as soon as iPhone came, you needed the capacity for which we had built this platform. We used to say this is like 30x more performance than nearest system. Nearest system, this was 30x more performance, right? So instead of creating a rack, you can create basically a pizza box, and you'll actually have the performance. Well, iPhone came, and you needed that, right? Well, we didn't know iPhone would be coming, but it happened. You got lucky that way. If you look at Elastica, the thesis was SaaS is going to be everywhere, and you're going to need this new architecture of CASB. But when Microsoft switched, basically, to go, Office 365, and they had different names of their products over time. Basically, that became very relevant. We got lucky in that sense, but we were prepared for it, just right before it, not too late in that sense. Product was mature and all. And here we're seeing something similar going on. We had the thesis of data, but we didn't realize this chat GPT moment is going to come, right? To this extent, we definitely had the thesis the AI would require the data. Definitely had the thesis. In fact, if you look at the video, the company won the best startup of the year for RSA in 2020. Our thesis at that point was that this whole user interface in which you have to aim with the mouse and click it and then know the platform, this should go away and it should be conversational. In fact, if you see a demo on the YouTube back from 2020 February, it was actually conversation interface. You will actually type questions, it will do things, and that thesis was there, how AI should be utilized. And of course, we were using AI from the get-go, how the data should be classified and all. But the demand that we're seeing right now, Kyle, is more about enterprises wanting to use AI in their enterprise, but it's not possible until you actually make use of your data, proprietary data. And that's where, if you could be that layer which enables that, the safe use of data and safe use of AI, then you're actually, you're very valuable to the enterprise. And that's what's going on right now. That's why you asked me when you started this session, how is it going? Is I told you awesome, was because that feeling of being of some value to the ecosystem, actually, it's very inspiring.
Yeah. Well, let's unpack this just a little bit further, right? Because thinking about where security started, Securiti AI started, and the early years, it was a lot of like posture management, right? Of, okay, where does my data sit? And what are the security controls in place for it? Like, who can access it? Where is it flowing? And trying to give you like a better risk posture understanding and resolve some of these maybe like configuration issues that might exist. Now, over time, you think a little bit more about, hey, okay, how does this enable AI, and what are the opportunities here? I think there's a lot of platforms that offer like a similar sort of value proposition of like, hey, we can help you enable AI. So help connect those dots of like from where you started with that kind of manage your data, protect it, ensure it's configured properly, to how that actually transitions today to enabling the use of that data within a corporation's walls.
Yeah, exactly. So the configuration checks, Kyle, is one kind of controls that you want to have, right? But if you look at the enterprise data securities, let's say if there was a data security score, it would not just be the only this one, right? Or if he said data control score, I should be saying, posture checks would be an important aspect, but not the only thing. I'll give you an example. But what do you want to do with data? There are, I would say, three different kinds of people who really care about data. One, certainly nobody wants the data to be stolen, which means the external posture has to be make sure or always is there. Your access and over privileges, and you have to companies have to understand it, and go into the least privilege model. And then you also need to understand if there is an activity going on the data, what that activity is, and if they want to change something because of that visibility, right? So there is definitely a security personas who would want to make sure the data is safe at any given time. Then you actually have personas who really care about not just necessarily from external threats, but internal rule book on the data. That's generally called governance on data, right? Internally in any organization, and especially large organizations with tens of thousands of people trying to access the data, they need a rule book. What data can be utilized for what purpose, and what is happening right now with the data, right? Well, data is a representation of the business. Data is not just ones and zeros. It represents a process. It represents their customer. It represents their business function. So they want to make sure that internally there is very clean rule book established. And then, of course, third thing is you have, privacy, to make sure there are regulations which require you to use data in a certain fashion and make sure it's compliant. Not beyond privacy regulations, there are myriad of regulations from PCI to NIST to EU Act and all that, and GDPR and all. So as soon as you bring the AI into the mix, now AI, think of especially agents into the mix. Agents cannot function or do anything of meaning till they understand the same data, which means all these things become valuable, but they have to be combined together. It has to be secure. Agents use has to be secure. Internal rule book has to be followed. Privacy has to be, make sure privacy is not being violated, and make sure that you're not breaking any existing compliance that exists on existing data, and new compliances. Like you have new compliances on AI coming through, like NIST AI RMF or EU AI Act. So the way we have created this, the framework is it enables you to, when you bring the new AI model or new AI agent, you can look at all these controls, and you can enforce these controls on the use of the models with your data, and how the agents can or cannot touch the data that you do not want them utilizing. Without those controls in place, AI just cannot happen inside the enterprise. It becomes kind of an enabler. The very first thing you would want to do is to make sure these are in place, these are the guardrails in place, and you can utilize them AI into the mix, right?
Yeah, that's
now,
amazing.
On the security side, new frameworks are coming. And just I'll say and let you take it through. New frameworks like OWASP top 10 for LLMs. They are becoming very popular. So how do you, again, instead of going in silos and building your own OS, can we actually provide most of the OS top 10 for LLMs to the customer, so they can actually go on the journey of doing amazing things with the AI and AI agents?
Yeah. And I mean, I was just going to say, like, piggybacking on that, really, it's amazing how many technology products then end up involving some element of compliance and security management within it, right? Like, even if you're not just a pure GRC platform, like, ultimately, compliance is a key driver of security programs within these organizations, and they want to make sure that they're addressing all these different requirements. And so it feels like more and more common that is at least one piece of a comprehensive platform, is being sure that you're thinking about those requirements. And to your point, they're constantly changing, especially depending on like the location that you're in. Okay, so
I'll just add to that point, if you would. So compliance is a set of guidelines that companies have to follow, or sometimes companies would follow grudgingly because they don't think sometimes it is kind of necessary, so they can go through kind of a mechanical check marks kind of an exercise to say, oh, we're compliant. That's changing with AI. Actually, companies want to be compliant or take the spirit of the compliance and apply it internally because it actually will help them, right? So compliance used to be one thing. It went in two ways. One is you can go paper check mark exercise, get all the check marks, you feel good. But I think we're seeing increasingly where people want to instrument these controls. So they have an actual view of the compliance is a set of controls, that these controls, are they happening or not happening? Because they generally don't want data to go to AI in a way that can be learned and used by others, or that can leak, or they get something in their environment which they shouldn't have because of IP issues and all that, right? So we are actually seeing genuine desire by large customers to take the essence of compliance and the controls to make sure they're actually happening, particularly on data and AI projects.
Yeah. Well, Rehan, I feel like I have another 10 questions that are top of mind just right now, but I think these will have to be saved for maybe the sequel at some point here in the future. I really appreciate the time. I'm incredibly impressed with just how well you've tracked some of these different like landmark technology shifts over time. And I think looking back, it's easy to say like, oh, hey, this is going to be transformative. I think at the time, it's not quite as clear. And I think that can be said for some of the different components of AI as well, where like a lot of people generally agree that AI has potential and is core to the future, but like the exact components of like what makes AI most valuable in 10 years is probably not something that most people are thinking about right now. So again, I'm very impressed with how well you've done in understanding, monitoring these trends and building businesses around them. So thanks for sharing your story and experience here.
Kyle, I really enjoyed the discussion, and we'll be up for a sequel on it because the story goes
Yes.
on it. We generally believe the world is changing again. Like, I think is easily everyone can see it, not just any one of us. But what it will be is not easily seen, and what
Right.
things will be playing a relevant role, because there's definitely a shifting sand in the world of AI. So how you actually create that continue to be very important in that shifting sand. I think that's really going to be the important aspect for any company, not just us.
Completely agree.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and you can write to me at kyle@secureventures.io. I'm Kyle McNulty, and you've been listening to Secure Ventures.